evening, everybody, and welcome to Late Night in Canada. As always, I'm your host, Clare Blackwood. How's everybody doing? I don't know about you folks, but it felt like one of those weeks where every single time I checked the news, I either wanted to hurl my computer out the window or just set the entire province of Ontario on fire and end our collective misery once and for all. Because, Ontario, I love you, but goddamn, we really stole the show this week, huh? Finding news stories about literally any other province was almost impossible because every time I found one, Doug Ford launched himself in front of it like an intercontinental ballistic missile made out of hair gel and crocodile tears. I understand now why no one paid attention to minor US events while Donald Trump was in office. You can't focus on anything else when one of your major political leaders is so woefully incompetent. And just to be clear, I'm not comparing Doug Ford to Donald Trump. They are two very different, very terrible leaders with two very different, very terrible brain cells. But I must ask you to forgive me, rest of Canada. I promise I'm not ignoring you. It's just that you're not fucking up nearly as much as my province is. So with that in mind, let's get to the news with This Week in the North. I want to get all the Doug Ford nonsense out of the way right off the top, and then we can move on to what happened elsewhere. And I'm going to do it as quickly as possible because while it is important, I'm just so sick of seeing this asshole's face all the time. He is everywhere. I see him when I close my eyes, staring back at me like some kind of thin-lipped albino toad. He haunts my dreams. The only good thing about him is that he was such a tire fire this last week that his popularity took such a huge hit that I dare to imagine us voting him out in the next election. But until then, here's what went down in a segment within a segment I'm calling the Ford Fuck-Up Files.
We got it wrong.
Okay, so on Monday, after a weekend of terrible restriction policies flip-flopping back and forth faster than a teeter-totter on methamphetamines, Ford's government was like, whoops, we made a mistake. Apparently carding is bad. And the rest of us looked up from the guillotines we were making and went, you think? And then on Tuesday, not only was Doug absent from the Ontario legislature for the second day in a row, but his government finally announced that they were considering paid sick leave. And we were like, considering? And then resumed sharpening the blades on our guillotines. And then we heard that Ford was missing because he was in isolation due to a staffer getting COVID. And we were like, karma's a bitch, huh? Until we remembered that he still gets paid $800 a day in isolation after a year of denying paid sick leave to everyone else, and started sharpening our guillotine blades even faster. We also learned that Ford's government had ignored its own scientists' advice about COVID vaccination hotspots and had neglected 5 high-risk postal codes in favor of 8 lower-risk postal codes that just happened to be in conservative ridings. And let's be honest, no one was surprised by this. I'd be more surprised to learn that Doug Ford even knows what a hotspot is. He probably thinks hotspots are where he goes every winter to get a tan. But why does Punta Cana need more vaccines? But moving on to Wednesday, we were all given the gift of learning that Premier Doug Ford, the man in charge of the entire province of Ontario, and the man who openly mocked us all for calling his online vaccination process confusing, does not know how to use a laptop. And we were like, you can't make this shit up, while testing out our guillotine prototypes on rich person head-sized melons. And then everything came to a climax on Thursday, when Doug Ford stood up in front of the entire province, told us all how sorry he was about how badly he'd fucked everything up, and cried a bunch while guzzling water like it was liberal tears. And we would have given a shit, but we were too busy dragging our homemade guillotines toward his office like the world's most authentic French Revolution LARP. And that, my friends, is the story of Doug Ford's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad week.
We made a mistake.
Okay. That's done. No more Ford, I promise. So what else happened this week? Well, on Monday, Rogers' wireless network suffered huge outages across the country, knocking out voice calls, text and data, stopping students from going to online classes and Ontario adults over 40 from registering for vaccines, and causing Ontario's COVID numbers to be inaccurate as clinics were forced to use pen and paper. Or, in other words, a regular day in COVID Ontario and a pretty good customer service day for Rogers. On Tuesday, a video came out that showed Ontario police pushing a 12-year-old kid off of a scooter and getting into a verbal altercation with him after he failed to show them ID at a Gravenhurst skate park. Peel police are still investigating, but it's rumored that the OPP will be punished with only a 25% increase to the next year's budget. On Wednesday, it was announced that North Dakota will be offering free vaccines to Canadian truckers crossing the border from Manitoba. Upon getting vaccinated, all truckers will be provided with this complimentary bumper sticker. I will not be taking questions about that joke at this time or any time. On Thursday, Prime Minister Trudeau spoke at a climate change-focused global summit of world leaders organized by U.S. President Joe Biden and announced that Canada will be slashing its greenhouse gas emissions by 40 to 45% over the next 9 years. The NDP and Greens said that those numbers are too low, the Conservatives said that the numbers are too high, and Goldilocks said that they're just right before being eaten by bears after they were forced out of their natural habitats and into society because we're not doing enough about climate change. And on Friday, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization recommended that the AstraZeneca vaccine should be offered to Canadians ages 30 and over, which would mean one very important thing. The Harry Potter generation would officially be eligible to enter the vaccine ring. And let me be clear, lines, whether outside of a bookstore or waiting for a vaccine, are mere playthings for us. We will plan. We will camp out. We will shove men, women, and especially children out of the way to be first in line for that vaccine. So watch your backs, Gen X. We're coming for you. And remember, at least a quarter of us are Slytherins, so if you try and cut ahead of us to get jabbed, you're gonna get stabbed. This has been This Week in the North. My guest tonight is Ryan Galloway, Chief Engineer and Ambassador of Community Friendships with Toronto Food Not Bombs, an anti-capitalist, anti-waste, and anti-war grassroots organization dedicated to delivering groceries and meals to community members experiencing homelessness and food shortages. We talked about what the organization does, how people can get involved, and how the pandemic has actually helped to strengthen ties between them and their community. Take a look. Hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on Late Night in Canada today.
Absolutely.
So I would love for you, first and foremost, to kind of talk to me about the Toronto chapter of, Toronto Food Not Bombs and what it's all about.
Toronto Food Not Bombs has been around for about 7 years. A person named Squid started it out of their basement around that time, and that was, when they were doing like dumpster diving and acquiring whatever resources they could and, cooking things up and then bringing it to Allen Gardens and serving it to whoever lines up. They've been doing that for a long time. And I've got some amazing volunteers that work with them over the years. I came on about 3 years ago and added some logistical support. So, making sure, people got from where they're cooking to the park and made sure they were safe in the park and then back as well. Obviously dumpster diving is a big part of things, but now obviously a lot of things have changed with the pandemic. So the need is way up, and our team has grown a huge amount and have changed almost all of our processes.
Right. Yeah, I was reading articles about your organization, and I thought, to go back to the dumpster diving, I thought that was really interesting because I'd never heard of another kind of food organization doing that. And I feel like that could be very polarizing in both, did you find that was accepted within the community and people really gravitated towards that?
So there's some misconceptions about dumpster diving, about the quality of food that can be, acquired this way. I'm not sure if you know this, but grocery stores are notorious for throwing away things that are absolutely good to eat, and oftentimes not even expired yet. Oftentimes food will be thrown out in order to make room for other things coming in, or I've seen it sometimes getting rid of a huge amount of something so that the city has less of it and therefore can charge more for it, which is bonkers. But I haven't personally done a ton of the dumpster diving. Squid had written up something. They weren't able to make it today, and I was just going to read this about dumpster diving for you.
Sure.
So yeah, Food Not Bombs operates in a way that allows itself to be mobile and fluid. Dumpstering allows for the cheap procurement of supplies, allowing anyone to pick up and start serving just about anywhere and anytime. So that's the thing. There's Food Not Bombs all over the place, and they can start, at the drop of a hat. Just there's a need that arises that can happen. Each group is unique and needs with its own needs and demands, relying heavily on its members to have at least some food safety training. So there is, you can't just go out and be like,
I found an apple. Do you want this?
Exactly. There's a number of things that, so we get our food handling certificates and stuff so that we've got a good idea. We're not creating any problems for people, and we've got a record of nobody getting sick over years and years and years and years. So that's a good thing. Food can be thrown out for many reasons. I talked about this before. Oftentimes it's aesthetic reasons, but that's ridiculous. It's food. I mean, obviously there's aesthetic value in things, but that's not really what you're looking for when you're hungry. I worked with a couple of different groups. Zero Waste Toronto is a group that I work with, and we applied pressure to grocery stores to basically say, stop wasting all this stuff. We know exactly how you're wasting it, and we will happily reveal to the city and the people of the city what you're doing. Just give us your food. We know this stuff is being wasted. We'll pick it up. You'll save money. So no frills, and a couple of other ones did agree, and we've been flooding places that need food with produce, and other things, which has really changed the landscape in regards. Oh, kitty! In regards to food needing to get out there. So we've helped a couple other groups, Seeds of Hope, and a few others to fill up their pantries as well.
So that kind of leads me into my next question in terms of how you're functioning now as an organization. And like you said that you have to have your food handlers licenses, but can anybody join in some capacity if they want to?
This last year, we were having to just write the new rule book as we went, right? So, I was just looking at Squid, and they were like, I don't know if we can serve the same way. We can't have our volunteers go into the kitchen altogether. This is right at the beginning of basically a year and 2 weeks ago or something. We couldn't bring our volunteers into the kitchen altogether. We couldn't do that. So I had already been procuring some produce and canned goods and dry goods and snacks to set up bags for people in Island Gardens, because that was the other thing too. We couldn't cook the way we're doing things, but we also couldn't just stop helping people out there, right? And we were hearing about a lot of the food banks shutting down and city services shutting down and shelters turning people away. So what we did is we immediately switched what we were doing and went to the park and just had, plastic grocery bags, because that's what we could get, and made nice little hampers for people that lined up. And, I think it was only 30 or 40 people that first week, but maybe 50 or 55 the next week. And there was only me and 2 other volunteers the first week. Aiden, who's been a great volunteer, Aiden McKendrick, and Lamb as well, who are both featured in our materials. We're right there from the beginning, and I remember it was super terrifying. There's this pandemic that nobody knows what's going on. Everything's shut down, and we're out there, helping people as much as we could. And then the word got out, and we would do weekly social media updates, and people started donating money to us, and also produce and canned goods and dry goods, which was great. I would do all the logistics for that. Sometimes in your life, you just get to a point where you've been preparing for this your whole life, but you didn't know. And then adrenaline was all there. So not only were we procuring stuff each week for our Sunday service, but if we heard of anybody else that needed food, I would just go to the grocery store and get them whatever they could. And we had weekly budgets for these things because we only had so much money. But eventually, over the months and months, we were able to get different groups that could help us out. So Siva Kitchen, which is a Sikh group out of Brampton, who we've been serving beside for years. I said, hey, Jaswinder, who runs it over there, hey, why don't you bring us your food and we'll serve it? We're already there anyway. So we sort of brought them and filtered them in through us so that we had hot food to be served with our groceries. And then I would do sandwiches each week out of my apartment. So Aiden or Lamb would come over and we would make 150 sandwiches or something and add those to the bags. And then a muffin team came in who makes Ashley and her partner Sean make these amazing muffins for us every week. Person who does cookies. We've got someone who does eggs each week, and amazing stuff that has continued to add on. And I mean, you don't want to yada yada later, but this last Sunday, we did 320 or so odd people's groceries. So, and at this point, we've got 2 giant grocery bags full of stuff. So, the first 70 or 80 people get fresh berries. You have apples and plums and oranges, and these are in the treat bags. Treat bags for people who might be living on the street, so there are things that can consume quickly. So your hot meal, your sandwiches, your muffins, your cookies, candy bars, other kind of things, granola bars, and then in the other bag, you've got all your things that you would need a kitchen for. So dry goods, canned goods, great fresh veggies, and assorted stuff where people are just really happy to come to us, and they would prefer to come to us than to typical food banks, because
Right.
you can line up with us and we'll help you out, no questions asked. We're not interested in forcing people to explain their life story or
Right.
why they're in trouble. But it's been a heck of a change this last year. But I am, not shocked, but I really truly believe in the power of human nature. But it's been amazing, the amount of volunteers that we've had, and the amount of support. So well over 1,000 people have donated or volunteered with us.
On that note, if people wanted to volunteer with you, how could they get in contact with you?
Yeah, the email's right there on the on our website, TorontoFoodNotBombs.ca. So the email is team@TorontoFoodNotBombs.ca. So
Okay.
email us, no problem. We're always looking for donations of any kind. The way to donate monetarily is on there as well. We do pickups for canned goods, dry goods, pasta, produce, and any kinds like that. Always a big thing. Right now we're looking for a couple more drivers, because we're doing after our serve, we'll do deliveries to people that can't quite make it out. So
Okay.
we could use somebody to help with that for sure.
Great. That's good to know. And I was going to ask you what you considered your greatest, successes during this pandemic, but I think what you've been talking about, this is such a massive success. The fact that, like, in the middle of a global pandemic, when we're not supposed to be congregating and we're not supposed to be leaving our houses, you have people who want to help so much that you're now serving hundreds of people a week. And I think that's incredible. And this is Allen Gardens on Sundays. Can you tell people what time?
Absolutely. So our service will start around 11:40 Sunday morning. Might be 11:50 if it's raining. We got to set up the tents. Takes a little bit longer. The line I hear starts around 9 or 9:30, but we're typically done by 1:30. So the line goes very quick. And from what I hear, and from what I see from talking with people, people that line up and our marshalling team and everything, it feels like a family, and we get that kind of response from people. So it's pretty beautiful.
From my guests and from the amount of awesome people I've been talking to during this show, is the idea of kind of a community has been forming. Unlike anything I've kind of really seen during the pandemic, is just different groups reaching out to other different groups and making things happen because they have to happen. And I love the fact that what you're doing is a part of that. And I guess my final question to you, because I just found out that you were a professional actor, which is awesome, would be, how has your arts background, if at all, influenced what you're doing with your life today?
Sure. Well, as a performer, you would know, it's scary as hell, and then it's maybe a little bit less scary, and then maybe a little bit less. So being able to communicate in a way in which, I'm happy with that helps a lot. So we've done a lot of work feeding, people in the encampments, but also, working to get people phones and setting up contingency plans for people if they're, if the city, because the city was planning on making some moves and booting people out, but their plans have failed pretty spectacularly. But being able to communicate is a big thing, and also being able to feel comfortable and maybe tell a joke or identify with somebody. Having a background in performance and communication helps in that regard a huge amount. It's like my favorite part that I've ever played, except it's real, right?
Thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been really such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Claire. Good luck with your show. This is really fun.
Fun fact, it turns out that this is the 10th episode of Late Night in Canada. 10 whole episodes of shitting on politicians, talking about issues ranging from homeless shelters to vaccines to, and I will never let this go, this hat, interviews with the coolest people who somehow agree to talk to me, and Photoshop so bad that I'm frankly surprised the Canadian government hasn't arrested me yet. I just want to say thank you for watching and supporting the show. Every time one of you shares it or sends me a nice little message about it, my cynical, politically wrathful heart grows just a little bit bigger. So as always, this has been Late Night in Canada. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.